Back in the 1990s, my dad broke his leg, and mom had to drive the family pickup to the grocery store. When dad drove, 15 miles per gallon. When mom drove, it was 18 miles per gallon. If you get online and look up, how do I improve my fuel economy? Probably the number one answer you're going to get is change your driving habits. So let's take a look at how to drive for fuel economy and why. So back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, a lot of people would put a vacuum gauge on the dash where they could see it while driving. The goal was to keep your foot out of it, so you got the highest vacuum reading. And if you stepped her down, you lost vacuum and fuel economy. You let up, you got high vacuum and better fuel economy. Now, there's something called a scan gauge that plugs into the OBD2 port on 96 and newer vehicles, and you can scroll through there and you can select instant fuel economy and average fuel economy. And then while you're driving, you can watch that instead of a vacuum gauge. Most newer vehicles have something in the gauge cluster that kind of shows you instant, average, and possibly other data regarding fuel economy. Now, when you first start the engine, it's cold. Now, I did a test on the Jeep, 95 Jeep, and it was 32 degrees Fahrenheit. That's freezing point. I started it up, and the injector pulse width went to over 30 milliseconds. Like that. And after a couple of minutes of warming up, it went down to 8 milliseconds. And then after it was up to full operating temperature, it dropped down to about 2 milliseconds. That means that when the engine was stone cold, it was using 15 times the amount of fuel that it did once fully warmed up. And it's not just at idle, it's driving, period. So if pouncing that throttle uses more fuel even when it's warmed up, it's many times that much more fuel when it's cold. So when the engine is really cold, baby it. Take it super easy. Now, when you step on the throttle on an older carbureted vehicle, there's something called an accelerator pump. And it just shoots fuel right in the top, doesn't go through the jets or other metering system, just shoots it right in the top, because when you pounce that throttle, the throttle blade's open and you get air right now, but not necessarily fuel. And so whether it's a carburetor or even fuel injected, you're going to get that dump of fuel to fill in with that big gulp of air you just ingested until the regular normal system can catch up. So avoid transients. Ease on the throttle, ease off the throttle. Why off the throttle? Because when you back off, you have a lot of liquids in the intake tract. Even port fuel injected. You have wet walls. And then when you let up, now you're just sucking all that raw fuel because you don't have the air coming in to go along with it. And the walls got wet because the system reached a state of equilibrium based on the intake pressure, or vacuum, if you will. And so when the vacuum goes up, because you let off the throttle, now that fuel that was comfortable being a liquid before, all of a sudden vaporizes off. And it wastes fuel. So ease on the throttle, ease off the throttle. Taking off, when you're coming up to a stoplight or a stop sign, you see you need to stop, back off gradually, and then let off. If you're going in a hilly area, all right, speed limits say 55, and you're coming down the hill and you're doing 55, get her up to about 59. If you think you can get away with it with law enforcement, just don't go overdoing it. But then as you crest the hill, you might let it slow down to 50 or so. So you're doing 55 here, 59 here, and then 50 here, and then you let it pick up speed going back down the other side. It's a variance of 5, 10 miles an hour. Maybe traffic won't tolerate it, but if you can get away with it, that will improve fuel economy. Empty the trunk. How many people are carting around 150 pounds of stuff you don't need? That extra weight is going to cost you fuel economy. Finally, there's something called hypermiling. You can look it up, and taken to the extreme, you basically, if the speed limit is 55, you'll get up to about 59, shut the engine off. I mean, literally, shut the engine off. And then you coast down to about 46, start the engine back up, get her up to 59. It's not recommended. It's illegal. When the engine's off, you don't have power steering, your alternator's not working, your accessories basically aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Doing this hypermiling is concentration intensive. And if you're concentrating on your hypermiling, you're not paying attention to other vehicles or pedestrians. It does improve fuel economy. And if you go to some of the fuel economy forums and whatnot, there's hypermiling gurus. And a friend of mine, Diamond Larry, bought a brand new, I think it was 2013, 2012 Toyota Prius. And he was over 90 miles per gallon with that thing. Very few mods, mostly hypermiling. If you can just look at what hypermilers are doing and glean the concept and stay legal, some of the tactics, I mean, drop it off to 50 at the top, 59 at the bottom, that's like watered down hypermiling. So getting some of those concepts can help you. But just remember, smooth and easy. The faster you drive, the more wind resistance is going to cost horsepower, cost fuel. So the difference between 45 and 55 miles per hour isn't that much. But the difference between 65 and 75 miles per hour is a lot of fuel. So, also keep that in mind. Keep your speeds lower.